Roger Ebert died on Thursday at the age of 70 after a prolonged battle with cancer. Many consider him America's most prominent and influential film critic. Ebert spent 46 years reviewing movies for the Chicago Sun-Times. In 1975, he became the first film critic to win a Pulitzer Prize. That same year, he began debating movies with his colleague Gene Siskel on a public television program that grew to national syndication. Siskel and Ebert became a television staple. Their trademark thumbs up or down could determine the fate of a movie. In 2006, cancer took away his ability to eat or speak, but he continued working and even wrote a memoir. He also became an active presence on Twitter. Last Tuesday, he wrote on his blog that he would be taking what he called a leave of presence. He wrote, "I am not going away." Upon news of his death, tributes flooded in from all over. Directors Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, and Robert Redford highlighted his impact. President Obama said of his fellow Chicagoan, "Roger was the movies." When he didn't like a film, he was honest. When he did, he was effusive, capturing the unique power of movies to take us somewhere magical. Joining me now are two critics who admired him, A.O. Scott of the New York Times and Dana Stevens of Slate magazine, and from Stanford, the filmmaker Warner Herzon. Ebert was an early champion of his work, and the two corresponded over the years. I am pleased to have all of these people at this table to talk about Roger Ebert, who came to this show a number of times to talk about his love for film. But let me just begin with the obvious. Give me your sense of his life as a critic.
Well, I think it was extraordinary. I mean, he was, a daily newspaper critic, which means that he produced an extraordinary amount of copy very quickly and at a very high level of quality. So he would review, I think, sometimes, 7 or 8 movies a week.
Yes.
So, and he came at movies, I think, in both a very knowledgeable and also a very democratic way. Yeah. That is, he embraced the movies as a popular art. He also had an extremely sophisticated knowledge of film form and also an encyclopedic knowledge of the history of cinema. And he presented all of that to his readers and then eventually to his viewers and even then to his Twitter followers with great directness and enthusiasm and honesty.
This is a letter to you.
From Roger Ebert.
From Roger Ebert. Thanks for the nice words. In answer to some of your many questions, take lots of English and writing. May I read this? Take lots of writing and English courses. Get all the good movies. See all the good movies you can. Write, write, write. For any place that will print your stuff, school paper, neighborhood shop, or local paper, etc. Experience is invaluable. And then he goes on to say that I think Film Comment is an excellent magazine, and talk a little bit about other things. Tell me your sense of what he meant to you as someone who was going to become a film critic.
Well, I'm discovering now, after his death, that this was only one of many such letters that he wrote to young film buffs and film nerds and people who admired Siskel and Ebert. And, in fact, I've seen online over the last few days, as there's been this incredible public mourning for him, especially on Twitter, people posting letters that he wrote to them. So, I think, in my case, it did end up being a part of my career and of my life that he had written me this letter. But it to me, is precious now more as a mark of just the generosity of this person who, despite the kind of daily schedule of reviewing that Tony described, was also an incredible communicator. And this, with the advent of the internet, became a major, major part of his life, especially when the power of speech left him in the last 6, 7 years of his life.
Werner, remember him for us.
I never really saw him as a critic. There was much more about him. I believe that Roger Ebert, very early on, I understood this is a national treasure. He's the one who gives this excitement, this agitation of mind, this collective agitation of mind about cinema, and an intelligent discourse about cinema. And that was a real powerful part of his existence. And I think with him, a whole epoch ends. You see, there was 45 years discourse about cinema, and over the last 2 decades it has dwindled away. On television you don't have it anymore. Siskel and Ebert or Ebert and Roeper is no more. And in the print media, reviews or criticism or discourse about cinema is dwindling away, and it has been replaced by celebrity news. So in a way there's something much bigger about Roger Ebert not being with us anymore. It's a whole epoch that is disappearing. Not completely yet, but there was something big, and he was a wonderful man, always someone who was after illumination, something about truth in cinema, and that's how I connected with him. We always had the feeling there was something much deeper than just movies that we should talk about.
Which brings me to one of his appearances on this program, 1996, talking about the power of movies as an art form. For me, talking about you, this is a direct quote, no other art form touches life the way the movies do.
Because it takes us inside the lives of other people. When a movie is really working, we have an out-of-the-body experience. Now, I'm not talking, this is not the Psychic Network. I mean,
you've seen too many movies, Roger.
No, I haven't. Has this ever happened to you? Come on, Charlie. You're so wrapped up in the story that you really aren't aware of where your car is parked, where you're going to have dinner, what's going to happen tomorrow. You just only care about what's going to happen to those people next. When that happens, it gives us an empathy for other people who are there on the screen that is more sharp and more effective and powerful than any other art form. And I'm speaking as somebody who loves to read. I love to read. But the movies do touch us more deeply, I feel, than any other art form. Good movies. Great movies.
Let me come to that point in terms of criticism and movies that he was describing.
Well, I think that what he's saying there is very much revealing of his own relationship to them, and I think one of the things that makes him a great critic is that essential humanism, that what movies finally for him are for, what they do uniquely.
Was he
and
different
more
than most critics then in that?
I'm not sure that he was different. He was more. He led with it a little bit more, I think. I mean, I think that there are other critics who pay more attention to the you know, to the formal dimensions of the art form, or who are more excited by you know, experimental or avant-garde tendencies in cinema, which he was open to. He was not dogmatic, but for him, it's just what he said there. It's about watching people and entering into their lives and understanding their feelings and being swept up into this other reality that's always, whatever the genre of the movie, whether it's science fiction or animation or documentary or comedy, a human reality.
I would just, can I add to that, just that in the last third of his life, in this last third act of his career, you could say that tendency became even more pronounced, I think, to lead with the heart, and that he really did become so much more than a film critic. On his blog, you know, the things that he wrote about, whether it was his illness or his disability or his history with addiction or his love for his wife, I mean, he just became this torrent of language, and it was an incredible place to visit, whether you wanted to read anything about the latest movies or not.
You've basically said once, I think you were quoted as saying that, you know, I have always loved Roger for being a good soldier. What? Yes. A soldier in what army, fighting for what?
You have to forget about military. I was called by him once a good soldier of cinema, and I gave it right back, and I said, Roger, the real good soldier of cinema, that's actually you. You are plowing on. You are holding out an outpost that many others have abandoned. You are still doing the intelligent discourse about cinema. You are inspiring us. You are the soldier, and of course now you are disabled. You are the afflicted one. You are the wounded soldier. You cannot speak anymore. And what an outrage. The greatest two rappers or speakers that I'm aware of, Muhammad Ali and you, are silenced. What an outrage. What an outrage. And you still soldier on. So that was my salute to him, and that's how I still see him. And you see, a man like Roger Ebert, yes, he does die, and he was severely wounded and lived on and struggled on for so long, but he's staying on with us. There are guiding principles that he defended, and we as filmmakers do defend what his spirit was, or at least I am trying my best.
Did you fill in? Did you take his chair at the movies?
Yes, I mean, I started when he was ill and was first and was still associated with the show, filling in as part of a rotating cast with Richard Roper, and then for the last year that Disney had it in syndication, Michael Phillips and I, Michael Phillips, the critic for the Chicago Tribune, who I guess has Gene Siskel's old job, he and I gave it a go for a year, and I have to say, it is not easy. I don't know. I think it looked easy when the two of them were doing it, but I think that having been through that and having tried, to do what he did in broadcasting, it just redoubled my respect for him. That he was able to be serious and intelligent and speak his mind about a whole range of movies in that medium, in this mass medium, quickly, and with this other guy sitting across from him, waiting to pounce, was really something.
Did he and Siskel make each other better?
They were a great pair. I mean, it's interesting to imagine what would have happened if Siskel had lived. He died in 1999, right? And I mean, I don't know if that show would have gone on or in some other incarnation, but it seems like the two of them had some sort of relationship that would have continued.
Myrna, how did Roger handle his illness?
Well, like the good soldier, that's how the wounded soldier battles on, and he was just relentless with the situation and kept plowing on and kept doing what he wanted to do. And of course, there's an incredible amount of discipline there, which I always admired in him, and writing 10,000 reviews about movies is an incredible feat of discipline. But at the same time, I always had the feeling there is a good solid amount of natural anarchy in Roger, and I like this side as well. So he was not a one-dimensional person, and it's just wonderful how he touched us all.
Well, just because we were talking about how he used television as a medium, I just had to jump in and say, and then when the internet came along, he kind of made that his own too. And, unlike the two of you, I never met him personally. I just sort of regarded him as a mentor and a teacher from afar and sort of a colleague. But following him on Twitter, as I did, so many people, 800,000 people, felt that they knew this person who had so many...
800,000.
Something like that. It's in that zone. Yeah. But so many passions, not just film, but, you never knew what was going to come up on his Twitter feed, and we'll miss it so much.
Well, he wrote a cookbook about how to cook every kind of food
after
with a rice cooker after he could no longer eat. He wrote several travel books. He wrote the memoir. He was a technological enthusiast also. I mean, going back, it wasn't just that he went onto Twitter after he had lost his voice. He would, brag about having an email account, in the 1980s.
Right, he was the first adopter of everything.
Absolutely.
First adopter, yeah, right.
And always forward-looking.
Here's another clip from this show in 2002 talking about the responsibility of a film critic. Here it is.
What book or what anything has influenced the way you watch movies?
I read Pauline Kael, of course. She's the great leader of all of us film critics.
And what did she teach you?
Well, she taught me something that Robert Warshaw, another great critic, put in a very succinct way. He said, a man goes to the movies and the critic must be honest enough to admit that he is that man. Now, of course, he could also be a woman. I mean, it was a sexist comment, but nevertheless, you're the person in that seat. It's your reaction. It's your opinion, and you have to say, for example, I went to see Antoine Fisher, and I cried, and I told you that I cried, but oddly enough, I'm reluctant to tell you that I cried because it makes me look like a sap, because critics are always crying, and I want to be the critic who's too tough to cry. But if I did cry during that movie, then I have to tell you that happened. I have to say, if I was aroused by an erotic scene, I have to tell you that happened. If I laughed, I have to tell you it was funny. I went to see Jackass, a shameful movie. I laughed all the way through it. I mean, I have to tell you that. I'm the guy. I was in the theater, and I have to be honest. I can't try to tailor my opinion to make it respectable or fashionable.
He said famously once, Roger did, your intellect may be confused, but your emotions never lie to you.
Yeah, that was a beautiful clip. I think that really just personifies, I mean, I couldn't say it any better, just what you said about, the guy who sees a movie and then talks about what happened to him while he saw it.
Yeah, no, I think that's as good a definition of.
But how would you define a role of the critic? Just differently.
Well, differently. I mean, I think I guess one place where I might differ is that I think you not only have to go with your emotion. I think you do. I think you have to be honest about it. But I think you also have to think about it. I think that Roger did. That you have to bring some kind of analytical and skeptical thought to bear, because movies are very powerful engines for producing emotions. They can make you feel all kinds of things. And whether the ways that they do that and the ends that they're pursuing when they do that are legitimate or defensible is something that you have to think about and something that you have to... So you have to say, yes, I cried, but you could also say, well, this movie that made me cry was not necessarily a good movie.
But, you know, I know for me, and I think for a lot of fans and readers of Roger Ebert, he was not the critic that you went to for a service report, you know, to see whether you should go see a movie or not. You might disagree wildly with his opinion and sometimes never be able to quite get to the bottom of it, but I just love the passion with which he'd write about things.
You love the way he shared his passion for film.
Yeah, another thing that was coming up when we had this sort of a Twitter wake for him the other night and people were posting stories and memories and kind of telling anecdotes about him was just the story of knowing the Nicolas Cage film from a few years ago. Just to me, to my mind, an absolutely awful film that he absolutely loved and that made him think about theology and free will and determinism and things that he cared about outside of the movie. And I think he posted 3 different blog posts on this Knowing movie with Nick Cage, and I saw it just because Roger Ebert was so passionate about it. And I still thought it was awful, but I loved the way he defended his point of view.
Well, and that was one reason that you watched him or that you read him was for that companionship. I mean, he was such a presence, such a literary and also a television presence that you felt. I think many people feel this way who never met him or spent any time with him, that he was a friend of theirs, that he was there with them when they were going to the movies.
You wanted to be his Gene Siskel, right? And if you hated the Nick Cage movie, you wanted to sit down and kibitz with him about it.
Yeah.
Werner, what do you think he expected? What do you expect from a film critic?
Well, a certain amount of wisdom, and he has to be anchored in real life. And that was Roger. He would, for example, talk very eloquently about how to raise children, that boys should dig a hole in the ground. He was blessed with Chaz, his wife,
yes,
and would wonderfully talk about her, and my condolences, of course, to her. She's suffering the biggest of all losses, and we would talk about emotions and how emotions inform our lives. And also, strangely enough, we had a lot of discourse about emotions in cinema. How does it work, and how does the audience develop a separate story, a different, parallel story, for example, in a romantic comedy? Right. We do anticipate, for example, the young lovers who have been separated by lots of obstacles. We race ahead in our emotions as an audience, and we wish and hope they will be reunited at the end and there will be a happy end. So there's a separate emotional story within an audience which is not all the time coinciding with the flow of the film itself, the story itself. So we kept musing about it, and that is something that only happens in movies. And if you are not anchored, if you do not understand emotions with other people and your wife that you love or the children that you love and have to raise, if you do not understand that, if you are not anchored in this kind of real life, you will never be able to describe cinema.
Werner, thank you so much. As I leave here, 2 things. One, early this week exchanged emails with Chaz, who said, "I have lost my prince." No, he was my prince, and I have lost my prince, is what she said to me. This is what he said in his memoir, Life Itself. I believe that if at the end, according to our abilities, we have done something to make others a little happier and something to make ourselves a little happier, that is about the best we can do. To make others less happy is a crime. To make ourselves unhappy is where all crime starts. We must try to contribute joy to the world. That is true no matter what our problems, our health, our circumstances. We must try. I didn't always know this, and I'm happy I lived long enough to find out. That says something about the way he confronted his own illness. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Werner.